In order to show mastery of Wisconsin Teaching Standards 1 and 2, I chose to focus on the use of non-cognitive skill development to increase middle school students' academic success. This all came to fruition after watching a TED Talk done by Carol Dweck on the importance of grit, and that started my first initial research into the concept of non-cognitive skill development. And so my essential question for this project was, how does the use of non-cognitive skill development affect academic performance in middle school students? And through this process, I'm really focusing on one project in particular where students struggle. And so I want to start out the school year right away, learning important non-cognitive skills and developing those skills so that we can practice as a class throughout the school year, so when they get to the most difficult project of the year, they have certain skills set in place to help them overcome and persevere through the project. Wisconsin Teaching Standard number 1 says that the teacher understands the content being taught. I understand the content that I'm teaching in the way that there are multiple misconceptions in science, going all the way from the difference between mass and weight to what is force and what are the different types of forces, all the way to what is work. And students have many different misconceptions based off of society and what society has told them and what scientifically those words truly mean. But the largest misconception that I've noticed students have is their brain development and how their brain actually works. Most of the time students will enter my classroom the first couple of days of school and they'll tell me, I'm really good at science, or I'm not good at science, with the perception of how they performed in the past is going to have a direct impact on how they will do in the future. That's a huge misconception. Through this research that I've done, it is now understood that a student has the ability to change their perception and their ability to do things. And so that's what I really want to focus on with that. Also, the idea that within the Next Generation Science Standards, or the NGSS, which we use, there are 8 principles that students have to master before they leave as seniors in high school. 3 of the 8 are these: asking questions, planning and carrying out investigations, constructing explanations, and designing solutions. Those are all high-level order thinking. And by the 8th grade, you would assume that they'd be able to do some of these, but what I found is they cannot. That higher-level order thinking is not instilled at this time, and they struggle. And so obviously trying to get them through that and persevere through difficult tasks. With Wisconsin Teaching Standard number 2, it says teachers know how students grow. And we all went through Piaget and child development in college, but the whole other aspect of this non-cognitive skill development was never discussed. And it wasn't until I researched Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth that I realized that this is another huge area that we need to focus our time on as educators. And so helping my students develop these habits of mind, that when they get stuck, that they have the ability to continue to positively self-talk their way out of problems. Focusing on the students' strengths first, letting the children gain confidence within their strengths that will also help them be able to move out of their comfort zone and into areas that they are not as confident in. And also creating connections through manipulations or engagement, but also the idea of giving them back responsibility. As their teacher, I have no control over how they talk to themselves, that self-talk thought. That's on them. So giving that responsibility back to them and saying, you have this ability to change the way you're thinking about yourself and about your abilities. Before this research, my students did very bad, if I can say so, on a certain standard. And the standard is this. This is an 8th grade NGSS standard, MSPS 1-6. And it says that students will undertake a design project to construct, test, and modify a device that releases or absorbs thermal energy through chemical processes. This was really hard for them. They do not follow multi-step directions well. They don't conduct research well, and they cannot generate questions often. So most notably, I see problems in here because this is by far the most difficult and the highest level of thinking needed to pull this standard off and get a good grade. About 50% of my students earn a D or an F, which means only 50% of my students actually show that they understand and are at least average when it comes to this standard. So there's obviously a big issue here. I hear a lot of I can'ts. I hand out the rubric and immediately they put it down and say this is impossible. A lot of groaning. It's very difficult for me as the educator in the room with them because they are not having fun and they are giving up, and it actually becomes a classroom management issue at that point as well. But through my research, I've realized this is an area I can control, and hopefully it will make a massive difference on the outcome of this year's project. Non-cognitive skills, as you can see right here, they have many, many different names. You could talk about self-control, self-regulation, self-efficacy. There's all sorts of words. But in my report or in my research, I just focused on these 3 words: conscientiousness, self-efficacy, and metacognitive skill development. The research clearly shows that when you focus on these things with your students, you will see an increase in academic achievement. Within 6 different sources, including the Department of Education in the federal government, saying that if we focus time on these skills, that we will see an increase in skills that students in the middle school actually have. All of this research is focused on middle school students. Conscientiousness is that idea of like self-discipline, the ambition, the persistence, the diligence, the dutifulness to get something done. This is also known as grit. So when you research, or if you decide to research it, look under grit and you'll find multiple resources. Self-efficacy is what we believe we are able to do, okay, with whatever skills we have. Again, it's a belief of what we can do, not what we can actually do. And students usually come into middle school with a low belief in themselves. We also call this growth mindset because you can change and grow your brain to change that. Metacognitive skill development is basically planning, developing, monitoring, and integrating information. It is a set of skills that you need to teach directly. The research shows that if you just try to put this in here and there within your lessons and your units, that it's not going to work, that you have to do direct instruction for this to make any difference on academic achievement for students. Within that, research also shows that students have to feel safe. They have to feel like if they make a mistake, it's okay. And so I really want to try to breed that in my classroom, the idea of a mistake is just a shot at learning and learning new things. So through conscientiousness, self-efficacy, and metacognitive skill development, starting out right at the beginning with my students, I'm going to hopefully notice by the second semester when we work on MSPS 1-6 that they have the skills necessary to persevere when they feel stuck or when they feel it's not possible. Obviously, trying to get rid of the doom and gloom thought process that my students tend to have with this standard. So with that, all this research shows that if you focus on these things, it will increase student motivation. It will also increase, through motivation, their enthusiasm. And if you can get those 2 things to increase, then you have higher academic achievement. Not anything that teachers didn't already know. It's just that now we have the research behind it. And so now, hopefully you can tell I'm passionate about this. In creating positive conscientiousness in my students. I want to include this into every lesson, every unit that I teach. This idea of conscientiousness, self-efficacy, and metacognitive skill development. It is something that I would like to teach and to help my colleagues to also develop within their classrooms. Also, the first week of school, I will be devoting the entire week to self-efficacy and an understanding of growth mindset. Also a little bit of grit, but these 2 will be my sole focus instead of a metacognitive skill development, just so that they understand what their brains can actually do and how they can decipher and decide how they are going to look at something, and then that will also promote success or the lack of success. I want to try to focus on that mistakes are okay, like I've already said. The goal is, really, truthfully, that by the time my 8th graders get here, they have those skills in place. And they do feel like they have the ability to persevere and work through the problems that they have. My effectiveness should improve, hopefully as a teacher, by using these, opening the door to an area that I didn't even know existed before. Again, I thought metacognitive skills were already developed, and when they get to middle school, that they should already know how to do these things. And the research shows that that is not true at all. They don't have these skills, and they need to be directly taught them. The learning environment should look very different when we're working on this project. Again, very doom and gloom before. Hopefully, this time around it's a lot more positive self-talk, more encouragement within each other, for each other. I won't hate being in the classroom at that point, and we have an increase in academic achievement for all of the students. I'm assuming, again, academic achievement will increase, student effort will increase, student engagement will increase. But I'm a little concerned about time, because as a teacher, obviously I have to incorporate all the NGSS standards within the curriculum, and now try to find time for non-cognitive skill development. That makes me a little nervous. And then ultimately you have those students who have gone through 6 or 7 years of schooling with negative self-talk, with complete doubt in themselves, no confidence whatsoever, and trying to instill that in them positive self-talk and a growth mindset, and to use grit in a 5-month period could be difficult with some students. So I understand that that's possible and that's there. But I hope, like I said, to introduce this to my colleagues, and maybe it can become something greater, so that not all of it is burdened on me, although I would gladly accept the burden. And also to make sure I'm giving as much choice as possible to increase that motivation and ultimately academic success for my students. So in the end, through the research, I found that yes, non-cognitive skill development will increase middle school students' academic achievement. And also, with that is something that we should be doing all the time, not something we just do here and there, but needs to be incorporated into everything we do as educators for the success of our students. Thank you.